Everybody, this is Chris from Skeleton. This video is part of an ongoing series as we cover progress updates on our way towards Skeleton v3, the next major iteration of Skeleton. If you have not been keeping up with these, you are able to come on to the Skeleton repository here, click on discussions, and then there is a pinned post here as part of our proposal and RFC. We also have the most latest update kind of pinned here at the top. But if you'd like to see some of the historical or previous videos, they are listed right here for you. Feel free to check those out. There's a written version and video version for every video, so just allows you a quick way to kind of come in here and see what's updated, what's changed, and where we are in the process. Excuse me. So as part of this, what I'd like to do is show you today is a little bit of progress towards this issue right here, which is updating the Astro documentation site. So the previous video you may have watched covered us initially sort of setting up the documentation, laying the groundwork, kind of getting the basics up and running. Today's updates are more polish, refinement, bringing that forward, putting in the tooling and things that we'll need in order to properly document all of our features going forwards. So as we kind of go through here, I'm just going to poke through the documentation, show you a few little odds and ends. You're going to see some details that are maybe a little different, like there's some icons and things that weren't here previously. The homepage looks a little different, even though it's still very bare bones. And then as you come through, you're going to see several of the little sections have changed. So some just minor changes here, these little chips at the top, these little toggles to be able to toggle between code and previews, things like that. Those are the changes we'll cover today. So a few things here, just as I noted, I do have each page kind of set up in such a way that you can see the documentation for the key features. So if I click this CSS link, you can see where the styles are being generated for colors here. You can see where the documentation page lives within our our mono repo. So if you were wanting to contribute, you could maybe go take a look at the source real quick, just to see how we're generating what's shown visually on the page. Additionally, if we come into some of these other sections, you're going to see we have the toggle here. We have some just additional content to just sort of support what's being shown here. The first one I really want to kind of cover is the typography settings. These were covered in the last video, but I wanted to showcase one change that's come as part of this wave of updates. So in the V2 version of the documentation, we always had kind of the request of, hey, we want the snippet you see when you look at the code view for this one particular feature. I want that to be exactly what I need to implement. And so in the V2 version, we kind of showed you the minimal amount of code. It wasn't always like a complete snippet. It wasn't always like exactly what you needed to just kind of copy and run with. With the V3 docs, we are changing that. So you'll see whatever is being rendered here in the preview is the exact same code that's being shared here. And if we update one, it updates the other. So I'll show you how that functionally works in just a moment. But just kind of keep that in your mind, that some of those changes here make it a little easier for you to see like a complete example of a code snippet for a particular feature. There's probably a few little odds and ends that have changed throughout here. Some of this you may notice. Some of it's just small things. Some better previews and things like that. For the most part, it's exactly what I just showed you. It's allowing you to come and see the source for what's generating the feature you're looking at. Look at the documentation, etc., etc. Now this is going to grow and change in the near future when we start porting over our components. So one of the major changes that we've made on the documentation side from the user's perspective is being able to quickly toggle between the different frameworks. The UI for this is not final, but we just want something to kind of reflect what that might look like. I'm looking at the React documentation, and then I come in here and now I'm looking at the Svelte documentation for a particular feature, something like that. You'll also be able to link directly to the source for the Svelte version, the React version, so on and so forth. The documentation page source, and then if we have any links to accessibility features like the ARIA documentation here, that's something that we had on the previous version, but we're just going to making sure we bring that forwards. Usage and all of that will be detailed here, and obviously this page is not complete. The feature's not currently shown, but you kind of get the gist of what that will look like when we get there. A couple other just small changes here. There is a new contribution page, which covers currently just documentation contributions. So the only thing that's really, in a state that's ready for folks to need to know how to use it is the documentation site itself. So I'm going to come back to this in just a second. I just want to show, cookbook and all the pages you've seen previously are still working here. So the contributing page, we've got documentation, again, specifically around how do I do features and changes for the documentation site itself. So we're not expecting folks to jump in and really kind of carry the weight on this. This is still some stuff we're going to be working on. But if you're curious to see how it's going to work, this page may be very useful for you. So the first thing is the list of features that we're kind of implementing and using. So we're using Astro, of course, which is the app framework that we're using to be able to use Svelte, React, and other frameworks, UI frameworks in parallel in one application. Of course, we're using Tailwind because this is using Skeleton for some of the design systems. Astro has a React package and a Svelte package, which we're taking advantage of. Currently, we are using Svelte 5, if you're curious. So anything that's using Svelte code will be rendered using Svelte 5. There's a little bit of some gotchas with that, in that it's a very experimental and very new. So it may or may not work super well right out of the gate, but we're laying the groundwork for it. The probably biggest change over the last couple of weeks is really the addition of this new Markdown MDX support. So in previous versions of the documentation, we utilized just standard, it was a Svelte Kit application. It was just Svelte pages that were using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript through, Svelte components. For the next version of the documentation, we really wanted to scale that back and simplify that, make it more in line with what you may be expecting from a documentation site. And so Markdown and specifically MDX are sort of the gold standards in that regard. It just allows you to write simple Markdown, and that creates the content for your page. It has the concept of front matter. There's some great documentation here on the Astro doc if you really want to kind of dig into that, or look at the MDX website itself. But the general idea with it is it allows us to run Markdown by default, but still utilize and fall back to HTML, or even import and use components if we so choose. So that supports Astro components, Svelte components, React components, you name it. They all work within this context. Some behind the scenes stuff, obviously Prettier is now been set up. Expressive code is now provided. So some of the code blocks you were seeing, these are now being provided by this really handy tool, which is created by one of the maintainers, or a few of the maintainers of Astro. So obviously plug and play support for Astro, Starlight, which is Astro's kind of official documentation template, and then even looks like Next.js, which is really cool. So really, really powerful feature. Like they're using it for their own documentation here. These like highlighted code block, bits in the code and stuff like that. All of those things are now provided to us by using this. And so we can have really nice, templates and all kinds of like really great features that come bundled with that, as opposed to having to reinvent the wheel and build all of that ourselves. Really, really good quality of life. Astro Icons we're also using, which again is another Astro based package. It's by Nate Moore, who is a big contributor in Astro. It is just extremely handy. It allows you to easily integrate Iconify or your own custom SVG icons. So you kind of have your choice of how you want to go about that. Currently, we're utilizing a couple icon packs from Iconify, hero icons and symbol icons. Off the top of my head, I believe is what they're called. It just allows us to do some of these icons that you see mixed throughout the application. Astro Import. I'll cover this a little further down, just because it's a little complex, a little more information needed to understand what that's doing. And then we're going to be utilizing NanoStores and the NanoStore Persistent, which are a framework agnostic solution for global state or state management. So rather than relying on stores for React and some other option for Svelte and another option for React or whatever, we kind of have a universal solution that we can share between all of these. Persistent is sort of like the local storage store in Skeleton. It's just allows us to persist that data to local storage. So if you close your window or open a tab or whatever, it'll help kind of keep that in sync. We're not utilizing that too much yet, but it will come for things like when you choose a particular like preferred framework, when you're tabbing through your components or something like that. We'll persist that option just so that it keeps that in mind and defaults that for you going forward. So theme selection, we'll need to persist that, stuff like that. I've detailed the application structure here, which is pretty standard. If you've seen an Astro application, it tends to have a very flat structure within the source directory. So you have a components directory, content, which is part of content collections, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Examples, which are the examples code that you see rendered on some of these feature pages, like the buttons examples. Those are those particular features. That's where those live. Custom icons that we have, which is right now just our skeleton logo, our little Scully guy here. And then, of course, we've got page layouts, the pages themselves, which are just primarily using slug-based routing, which is dynamic routes or generated routes, however you want to think of that. And then, of course, a place for our style sheets. If you're adding a new page, we kind of detail the process for that. It's pretty straightforward. You create a new MDX file in the content directory. The structure should be very familiar. You come in here. This is the project itself. Content. If we look under Tailwind features and then badges, there we go. There's all the documentation for the badge page, and it's pretty simple. You can see we're using some simple markdown here mixed with a custom component, which is the little toggle between the code and the preview. You can see the imports for the example components that are being provided into the page and things like that. So very simple process. You just create a new page in the content section, and it, a big improvement from V2. In V2, you would have to go to like a links folder and specify where that page is and all that. That's not the case now. All the routing that you see on the left hand is now just automatically generated. As soon as a new page is added to the content section, it will show up under the correct category over in the left. And again, that's part of that content collection stuff I was talking about just a moment ago. We show kind of a general use case for using Markdown. If you've never used Markdown, we do actually provide this underscore Markdown file. The underscore just indicates that this is hidden and not part of the navigation. But this is a bit of a kitchen sink page that just shows you a bunch of different formatting. So you can see how tables are formatted, how fenced code blocks work, how do you do block quotes, headings, on and on and on. All kinds of different examples here. There's a few things that are commented out because we may or may not look to use those. Things, images, just a splattering of a bunch of different options here. So if you're just kind of curious to see what your options are with Markdown, we've provided that file for that. And that's described in this little section here. Global components. So there are features that you're going to see if I come back to... let's go to Tailwind badges. You'll see that I've got features, components like this preview component. If you look a little higher up, there is actually no import for that component. There's no preview component imported from wherever it lives in the docs. In this case, under components, docs, preview, right here. And you may be wondering, like, where is that coming from? And so one of the cool things with Astro is that we can utilize a tool called Auto Imports, which is a plugin that you bring in for Astro. It goes into the Astro config file. And then down here, we just specify all of the imports that we want to be kind of globally available to all the MDX pages. And so if you come in and you need a code block or you need a preview component, all of those things will just be automatically imported for you. No need to manually import that, which again kind of keeps the boilerplate very, very slim and minimal for creating a page. We have a little bit of front matter. We have the components that are being imported and then the content itself. It's very, very straightforward. I'll talk about this a little bit in just a second. We do talk about the use of essential code. You can either use code fences. If you're not familiar with fences, those are the little 3 backticks you might have used in like Discord or on GitHub or something like that. Those are supported right in the Markdown, or there is a dedicated code component which is auto imported for you. Preview component. just as I just showed. It's a tab system basically. So you have a tab for the preview, a tab for the code. You import the component directly and put it right here. And then in Vite, we actually can do this really cool thing where we import the exact same component, put question mark raw on the end. And what that's going to do is it's going to obtain the actual text content that makes up the page itself. And so what we can do with that is then drop that in our code block. And that's how we keep parity between what is the visual example shown to users and what is the the rendered version and what is the actual code block. And it's coming again from that same singular source. We're just importing the same component twice, adding raw to the end here, and then just giving any unique name so that we can drop that and provide that to the code block. The cool thing with the code blocks as well, they support a huge variety of languages, including TSX, Svelte, and even Astro extensions or Astro format language. So really extensive with no additional work on our need to make that work, which is great. We do support tables. We have both the concept of markdown-based tables, which I've linked to a generator here that will kind of output some kind of, something that looks like this. It's actually where I generated that list that's just above this here on the page. You can see it right there. Additionally, we do have a very simple table component that I've created just for the documentation site. This is not the table component that end users will use as part of Skeleton. It's just very specifically for creating a table on the fly in the documentation. So if you want to see kind of the usage for that, it should be, I don't believe it's auto imported yet, but it will be by the time, this becomes relevant for you to help with documentation. A couple different options. I expect this to kind of grow and change, but it's there. Icons, we're handling that through Astro Icon, as I mentioned, as well as pairing that with Iconify. If you're not familiar with Iconify, it's a huge library of icon sets from different authors, different creators. And so if we come in here and we browse the icons, you can see, we get everything from like material icons to hero icons to a huge slew that I didn't even know existed. So there's plenty to choose from. They're considered kind of a pack or a set. And so we are limiting how many of those we provide just because of the overhead for importing and having those. But currently we have hero icons, which has a pretty large variety of options, very specifically the outline variations. And then simple icons, which is used for any kind of branding stuff. So if we need a Svelte logo or something like that, there it is. And then all we need to do to import that and use that is you tap it, and it shows this little box down here that says usage with Astro Icon. That's what it looks like to import it into the page itself. So if you browse through the documentation, you'll see some references to these icons here. Again, the icon component that it's using is auto-imported for you, so you can literally just drop those in most cases. Finally, linting, we talk about Prettier. So, if you've not used Prettier, we used that in the previous version of the docs. A lot of that information should carry forward. I did kind of skim over this real quick, so I do want to kind of return to it. We are importing a lot of components and features automatically. The one exception is that we have to include this little export line here, which what this is doing is there's an auto import for component set. Component set, if we come up here and look, is part of components MDX. This is the set here itself. Yeah, right there. And what this is doing is importing a bunch of typography looking, components. There's headings, anchors, block quote, things like that. So what we're doing right here is we're actually using a particular feature from Astro and specifically MDX that allows us to override a component. So if you do this sort of little, right arrow here, this creates a block quote in Markdown, which you may be familiar with. By default, it just creates that kind of, the final result is a block quote, HTML block quote element that surrounds that text, right? But the problem is with Skeleton, we append a little class there called, dot block quote, right? That's how our block quote system works. We come in here and we look at typography, we look at block quote. It looks something like this, right? We need this little class appended on there. And so what this feature is doing behind the scenes is it's actually replacing all of the components for MDX. So if we look at block quote, what it's doing, it's actually bringing that in using a slot system even, which is kind of cool, appending that class, and it just replaces the sort of baked in option with our own custom component of that block quote, right? Or the heading or whatever it is. And so we've gone ahead and replaced all of these, even the table itself. So if you look here, we're using the skeleton table styles here so that anytime you just do pure, markdown headings or block quotes or tables, what this is doing in the background is replacing those components with our own custom versions that has the skeleton typography system in place. So one line and you just immediately get access to that. And I can demonstrate this really quick if we come over to the badges page and I just turn that option off. Like let's just delete that line. I'm going to save that and we're going to look and boom, there we start losing all of our heading styles down here, right? So that's all that's doing in the background. So there is a hard requirement. Fortunately, we can't auto export this feature right here. So it's one thing you have to do per page. It's a little annoying, but really it's not too bad. As time goes on, I'm going to do a little bit more documentation around this just to kind of further refine, like what does the front matter data look like? What are your options for this? We're going to do type safety on this so that it should auto suggest options and also kind of give you a little warning if you misspell title or something like that. It'll kind of give you a little heads up on that, and it's just going to make it just much easier to make sure that you're staying within the guidelines for what it takes to create an actual page. The actual elements themselves here, I'll detail those later as well, but most of them are pretty obvious. Which layout are you using? What's the title for the page? What's the description for the page? Where's the source for this? So this is where that CSS file is linked on GitHub. And then do we want to show the documentation URL badge? It's this little badge that says show me this button right here, which auto links you to the documentation for that page on GitHub. So just a few options there, but you can kind of see how that all comes together and works in unison really, really well. So again, not a huge amount of visual updates with today's slew of updates, but some really powerful authoring kind of features and benefits here. Makes it much easier for us to really kind of pull these pages together, build them very, very quickly, and get it out in front of folks just as quick as we can. So yeah, with that done, the next area of focus is obviously going to be bringing forward some of these components. The accordion component is the most likely candidate that we're going to aim for first. We actually have a prototype for a very early version of right here, the accordion for Svelte and the accordion for React. So we'll probably just port those forwards. Those will live in new packages that we're creating for Skeleton. In case you're not familiar with our kind of structure, we'll be on the next branch, which is where all this development's happening. We have multiple packages here. So the core package is the one that will, as part of our, we kind of outlined some of this as part of our proposal, but the core package Skeleton is what houses all the Tailwind plugin and Tailwind features for Skeleton. Then we'll have dedicated packages for React, for Svelte, for Vue, or whatever in the future. And those are where the components themselves will live. So if you need a Svelte accordion, this will live inside this package here, and we'll have it set up from that. So that'll be the next part, is porting those features forward, putting them in their own custom packages, and then getting those set up where we can actually utilize those here within our documentation site, so that when we're not just saying here's where the React accordion example will go, we'll actually show it, and we'll link to both the accordion itself as well as the code, so you'll see the full details for what it takes to build that page, which is going to be really cool. It's going to be very, very very handy. So expect that very soon. As soon as the accordion component is done, then I'm essentially opening the floodgates for both our internal team and third-party contributors to come in and help port all of the additional features, because Skeleton obviously has many other features besides just an accordion. So that'll be everything from the app bar to app rail, app shell, all these features here. those will need to be ported forwards from what is currently Svelte 4 to Svelte 5 and React. So a bit of a fork there for those two new frameworks that we're supporting. And then as we get that kind of rolling, then my plan will be to switch over and start working on what is kind of I've got a little head start on the theme generator. I don't have enough here to show you really what it works, how it's working. I don't think our preview, it's not working right now. So don't really have enough to show you there, but maybe expect that, next update or so. But we do have some initial, groundwork laid for what the next version of the theme generator is going to look like, how it's going to work, and that kind of thing. And the exciting part of that is what this is going to do is bring together our first few kind of production grade themes using the new formats that I've talked about in previous videos. We'll go ahead and set up a theme switcher here on the documentation site, which will allow you to actually preview, all of these components with the different themes and the different options visually applied. And then, of course, kind of set the ground, set the standard for what, how many options can we provide? How does that work? That kind of thing. How do I generate my own even, So all that's kind of the next phase and what's kind of coming in the future. So again, just like previous videos, I'll tell you to look forward to future updates and, obviously lots of exciting stuff coming. So thank you for following along and hope you're enjoying everything we've shown so far. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.